In a recent One Piece manga, this happened. A man who hasn't fought in decades just stepped between Luffy and the most dangerous being in the entire world. Gaban, the old man in the Hawaiian shirt. The guy who spent the whole Elbaf arc joking around and drinking. He just took a hit that was meant to end Luffy's life. And by the end of this chapter, he loses his arm. So why did Oda pick this character? Not Zoro, not a Yonko, not even Luffy himself, to be the one standing in front of Imu? What does Gaban know that nobody else does? And what does this mean for Luffy's fight against the king of the world? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this moment might be one of the biggest turning points in the entire Final Saga. Okay, let's back up. If you haven't read the last 2 chapters, don't worry, I've got you. This all kicks off in chapter 1189. Luffy is already in bad shape. Imu, the mysterious ruler who's been controlling the world government from the shadows for centuries, has him pinned down using not one, but 2 legendary weapons. Think about that for a second. Imu isn't just strong. Imu has access to ancient weapons tied to the Void Century. The same forbidden history the world government has been hiding for 800 years. But here's where things get crazy. Imu doesn't stop there. While Luffy is barely holding on, Imu pulls out another weapon, the Xingtian Axe. And this thing isn't just for show. It's one of the legendary tools connected to the creators of the world government itself. Imu raises it. It's aimed straight at Luffy's neck. This is it. This looks like the moment Luffy dies. And then, at the very last second, someone jumps in front of the axe. Scopper Gaban, the old pirate who's been living a quiet life on Elbaf this whole time. The guy fans have been begging to see fight for years. He blocks the attack that was about to end Luffy's life. Just stand there. Takes it head on. That's where chapter 1189 ends. And honestly, that cliffhanger alone broke the internet. Now here's the part most people missed. This isn't random. Gaban didn't just wander in. We'll get into why in a minute, but keep that in mind. Chapter 1190 picks up right there. Before anything else happens, Gaban actually stops to talk to Luffy first. He doesn't rush into the fight. He takes a moment to basically humble him, mocking him a little for needing an old man to save his life, and warning him that the road to becoming Pirate King is going to demand a lot more than he thinks. Then Gaban throws Luffy out of the battlefield completely. Not gently. He physically removes him from the fight. And that's when it starts. Gaban versus Imu. One-on-one. Imu responds by drawing a new weapon, a blade called Honobami, also known as the Bone Eater. And Gaban answers with a technique of his own, something called Shinmon, Hasen Fukushu. This attack is so powerful, it literally tears open the ground beneath them. Both of them fall through the earth itself, crashing down into what the story calls the underworld, basically a hidden layer beneath Elbaf. The fight rages on down there, and it ends with a brutal image. Gaban lying on the ground, badly hurt, his left arm cut off below the elbow. Luffy sees this, and he's frozen, shocked. That's where the chapter leaves us. An old legend bleeding, missing an arm, and Imu still standing. So now the real question is, why him? Out of every character Oda could have chosen for this moment, why Gaban? Alright, let's talk about who Gaban actually is, because this matters a lot more than people realize. Gaban isn't some random old man. He's one of the original members of the Roger Pirates, the crew that found the One Piece, the crew that reached Laugh Tale, the crew that saw the true history of the world with their own eyes. And here's the detail that changes everything. Gaban wasn't just a member. Oda has confirmed, through an official Q&A, that Gaban was the 3rd strongest fighter on that entire crew. Right behind Joel D, Roger himself, and Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King. Roger, Rayleigh, Gaban. That's the trio. People even call them the original monster trio of the Roger Pirates. Sound familiar? That's basically the blueprint for Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Gaban's official role on the ship was Navigator, the man who charted their course all the way to the final island. But don't let that fool you into thinking he was just a background character. This is a man nicknamed the Mountain Eater after reportedly leveling an entire mountainside of enemies by himself. And here's the part most people forget. Gaban fought Kazuki Oden, one of the strongest samurai Wano has ever produced. And he held his own, on equal footing. Think about the era this man comes from. This is a guy who sailed alongside the future Pirate King during the God Valley incident, one of the most important, most covered-up events in the entire story. He was there. He saw what really happened, which means Gaban knows the truth of the Void Century. He stood on Laugh Tale. He saw whatever Joy Boy left behind. But here's where things get crazy. After the Roger Pirates disbanded, Gaban didn't chase fame or bounty. He settled down quietly on Elbaf, started a family, had a partner and a son. He became a background character in his own legend, living a peaceful life while the rest of the world moved on without him, which makes his return even bigger. This isn't a young, hot-blooded fighter looking for a reputation. This is a man who walked away from that life completely and chose to step back into it, specifically for Luffy. So why Luffy? Why does an old Roger pirate care about a rookie captain he barely knows? Because Gaban isn't just protecting a random pirate. He's protecting the will of D. He's protecting the dream Roger died believing in. And here's the part most people missed in these last few chapters. This isn't the first time Gaban tested Luffy. Earlier in the Elbaf arc, Gaban already challenged Luffy and Zoro, basically checking if they were strong enough and reckless enough to handle the dangers on this island. He's been watching, evaluating, deciding if Luffy is worth protecting. Now think about the timing of this fight. Emu is arguably the single most dangerous entity Luffy has ever encountered. Someone connected directly to the erasure of an entire kingdom, to the 800 years of hidden history, to the entire foundation the world government was built on. Luffy, right now, physically cannot survive a direct hit from Emu's strongest weapons. We just watched that happen. So Oda needed someone who could. Someone from the old generation. Someone whose strength isn't about a flashy new power-up, but about decades of real combat experience against monsters most current characters have never even seen. That's Gaban. He's not just a plot device to save Luffy. He's a symbol, a living piece of the Roger era, stepping onto the same battlefield as the being that might be responsible for the darkest secret in the entire story. This is Oda's saying, the old world and the new world are colliding. Right here, right now. Now let's actually break down the fight itself, because there's more going on here than just old man blocks axe. First, Emu's weapon choice mattered a lot. Emu doesn't fight with just one blade. We've now seen Emu wield multiple legendary weapons across these two chapters. Swords tied to ancient history, the Xingtian axe, and now, against Gaban specifically, a weapon called Honobami, the Bone Eater. Why does that matter? Because it shows Emu doesn't have one fighting style. Emu adapts, swaps weapons mid-fight, depending on the opponent. That's not just brute strength. That's someone with centuries of combat knowledge, and an arsenal most characters could never dream of accessing. And here's the part most people missed. Every one of these weapons seems to be connected to the Void Century in some way. Which raises a scary question. Is Emu even fighting with normal human strength at all? Or is a huge part of this power coming from ancient tools built by an entirely different level of civilization? Now, on Gaban's side, he answers with a named technique. Shinmon, Hassan, Fukushu. This isn't some throwaway attack. It's powerful enough to literally rupture the ground and send both fighters crashing down into a hidden underground layer beneath Elbaf. Let that sink in for a second. Gaban's attack was strong enough to break the terrain of an entire island. This isn't a warm-up move. This is a top-tier technique from a man who trained under the same era that produced Roger and Rayleigh. Then in the underworld, Gaban unleashes another move, Yachi Takaru, and it causes massive destruction around both of them. Even with age working against him, even after everything he's been through, Gaban is still hitting with the kind of power that shakes the environment itself. But here's where things get crazy. Despite all of that, Gaban still loses his arm. Think about what that tells us about Emu. This is a man who traded blows with Kazuki Oden, a man ranked as the third strongest fighter of the entire Roger Pirates crew. And Emu still took his arm. That's not a small detail. That's Oda telling us, in the clearest way possible, Emu operates on a completely different level than almost anything we've seen before in this story. So why is Gaban even able to stand against Emu when almost no one else can? A few reasons. First, combat experience. Gaban fought in an era of monsters. Whitebeard, Shiki, Kazuki Oden. He's faced legendary tier threats his entire life, which means he's mentally and physically calibrated for fights most modern characters simply haven't trained for. Second, haki. While the manga hasn't spelled out every technical detail of what Gaban's using move by move, characters from the Roger era are consistently shown to have monstrous natural haki, refined over decades. That kind of raw, seasoned haki is exactly the type of thing that could actually threaten a being connected to Void Century level power. And third, and this is more of a theory, so keep that in mind, some fans believe Gaban may know something about Emu specifically. Not just fighting instinct, but actual historical knowledge from his time on Laugh Tale. If Gaban understands even a fragment of what Emu really is, he might be fighting smarter than anyone else who's faced Emu so far. Bottom line, this fight is proof that Emu isn't just strong for a mysterious character. Emu might be operating on a tier that only the oldest generation of this story has any real chance of even scratching. So while all of this is happening, where does that leave Luffy? Honestly, humbled. Hard. Think about what Luffy just watched. He got pinned down and nearly killed by Emu. He needed saving, and the man who saved him isn't even at full strength anymore. He's an old man, years removed from active fighting, and even he is getting torn apart in this battle. That's a brutal wake-up call, because it proves something Luffy might not have wanted to admit. Right now, in this moment, he is not ready to fight Emu directly. Not yet. And here's the part most people missed. Gaban basically says this to his face before the fight even starts. He doesn't just save Luffy quietly. He takes the time to humble him first, warning him that the path to becoming Pirate King is going to demand far more than what Luffy currently has. That's not just flavor dialogue. That's Oda directly telling the audience. Luffy has more growing to do before this fight is actually his to win. Let's compare generations for a second. Luffy has Gear 5, arguably the most powerful transformation we've ever seen in this series, tied directly to the mythical power of Joy Boy himself. On paper, that should make him one of the strongest characters alive. But here's the thing. Gear 5 is still relatively new. Luffy hasn't had decades to master it the way Gaban has mastered his own fighting style. Roger's generation trained and fought during an era stacked with monster-tier threats, refining their skills over a lifetime. Luffy is still in the middle of his growth arc. He's insanely powerful. Nobody's denying that. But raw power without full mastery can only carry you so far against someone like Emu, who fights with centuries of knowledge and literal ancient weaponry. So what does Luffy actually learn from this? A few things. 1. He learns the scale of what he's really up against. Emu isn't just another strong opponent to punch through. Emu might be the single greatest threat in the entire series. 2. He learns that even the old legends, the ones he's looked up to, are struggling here. That should terrify him. And honestly, it should terrify us too. And 3. This moment probably plants the seed for Luffy's next step forward. In a story like this, watching someone else get hurt protecting you is usually the exact kind of moment that pushes a character to level up. We've seen this pattern before. Ace's death pushed Luffy toward haki mastery. This might be the emotional trigger for whatever comes next in his own power growth. So no, Luffy probably isn't ready to fight Emu one-on-one right now. But this chapter might be exactly what sets that fight up for later. Alright, this is the part you've been waiting for. Let's get into the theories. And I want to be clear up front. Everything in this section is speculation unless I specifically say it's confirmed. Don't take any of this as guaranteed canon. Theory 1. Gaban survives but never fights again. Given how brutal this injury is, and given Gaban's age, there's a real chance this is his final major fight in the series. Losing an arm is the kind of permanent, story-changing injury Oda doesn't hand out lightly. It's possible Gaban's role going forward becomes more about passing down knowledge, maybe about the Void Century, maybe about Emu specifically, rather than continuing to fight physically. Theory 2. This fight isn't actually over. Some fans believe the injury we just saw isn't the end of this confrontation. Gaban may still have one more move left, especially if he's protecting his son Cologne or trying to buy time for Luffy's crew to regroup. We already know Gaban has survived near-death situations before. He was critically injured earlier in the Elbaf arc and had to be saved. So he's no stranger to fighting through serious damage. Theory 3. Gaban knows something about Imu's identity or the Void Century that he hasn't revealed yet. This one is purely speculative, but it's a popular theory in the fan community. Because Gaban visited Laugh-Tale with the rest of the Roger Pirates, he theoretically has access to information about the Void Century that almost nobody else alive has. If he survives this fight, there's a real chance Oda uses him later as a way to finally explain, or at least hint at, what Imu actually is. Theory 4. This fight sets up Luffy's next transformation or power growth. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating as its own theory. Watching a legendary protector get seriously hurt while shielding him is one of Oda's classic storytelling triggers for growth. Don't be shocked if the emotional weight of this moment becomes the spark for Luffy's next step forward in strength or resolve. Theory 5. Imu's true strength is still being held back. Here's a scarier one. Everything we've seen from Imu so far, the multiple weapons, the overwhelming power, might still not be Imu's full capability. If Imu is connected to Void Century-era power in a way that goes beyond normal haki and devil fruits, there's a real chance the story hasn't even shown us Imu's true ceiling yet. Now let's separate fact from theory clearly, because this matters. Confirmed, Gaban blocked Imu's attack. Gaban is the third strongest fighter of the Roger Pirates. Gaban lost his left arm below the elbow. Imu used multiple legendary weapons across these chapters. Gaban and Imu fell into an underground layer beneath Elbaf during the fight. Theory, not confirmed, whether Gaban survives long-term. Whether Gaban knows secret information about Imu. Whether this is connected to Luffy's next power-up. Whether Imu still has more strength in reserve. Keep those separated in your head, because it's really easy for fan theories to start feeling like canon the more people repeat them online. Now, what does all of this mean for the Final Saga as a whole? This confrontation feels like Oda deliberately bridging two eras of the story. The Roger era and the current era, colliding directly with the being who might be the true final threat behind everything. It's a strong signal that when Luffy does eventually face Imu one-on-one, it's going to require every single lesson, ally, and power-up from this entire journey, not just Gear 5 alone. So, where does the story go from here? Let's rank the possibilities, from most likely to least likely. Most likely, Luffy re-enters the fight, but not immediately. Given how the chapter ends with Luffy shocked and Gaban down, the most likely next step is a brief cooldown. Maybe the crew regroups, maybe Luffy processes what just happened, before he's pulled back in the fight, likely with renewed resolve rather than raw anger alone. Second most likely, the focus shifts briefly to Imu's next move or motive. Oda loves cutting away at the perfect moment. After a moment this huge, there's a strong chance the story briefly shifts perspective, maybe to Imu's reaction, maybe to another part of Elbaf, before we get the next beat of this specific fight. Third, Gaban gets one final moment of defiance before stepping back. Even with the arm injury, it wouldn't be surprising to see Gaban get one last symbolic action in, protecting Cologne, saying something important to Luffy, or slowing Imu down just enough to matter, before fully exiting the fight. Fourth, less likely but possible, another old generation ally shows up. Given how dangerous Imu has proven to be, there's a chance Oda brings him back up. This is more speculative, but if the story wants to keep escalating the threat level, another veteran-tier fighter stepping in wouldn't be shocking. Least likely, Imu is meaningfully weakened or defeated this arc. Based on everything we've seen, the sheer weapon arsenal, the historical weight behind this character, it seems very unlikely Imu gets a real, lasting defeat this early. This feels like it's being built as a Final Saga spanning threat, not a fight that wraps up in the next few chapters. So here's where we're left hanging. Gaban, down an arm, having just proven that even a legend from the Roger era can't fully stand against Emu. Which means the real, terrifying question is this. If someone who trained alongside the future Pirate King himself can't beat Emu, what's it going to actually take for Luffy to? Let's recap the biggest revelations from these chapters. Gaban, an old member of the Roger Pirates and the third strongest fighter on that legendary crew, stepped in to save Luffy from a fatal blow by Emu. He fought Emu directly, using powerful named techniques, and even broke apart the terrain of Elbaf in the process. But by the end, he lost his arm, proving just how dangerous Emu truly is. Luffy, meanwhile, is left with a hard truth. He's not ready to face Emu head-on yet. But this moment might be exactly what pushes him toward his next step forward. Now I want to hear from you. Here's the big question. Do you think Gaban survives this fight long-term? Or do you think this is the beginning of the end for him? And more importantly, what do you think it's actually going to take for Luffy to stand a chance against Emu? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one, and I'll be pinning my favorites. If you enjoyed this One Piece breakdown, subscribe for more manga updates and theories.